Hi, it's me, Sir JP, and welcome to our next episode of Philosophy Live. This is an advocacy to reach senior high school students studying the core subject, Introduction to Philosophy. In this video, I simplified the terms and made a PowerPoint presentation to make it easier for you to understand. This is our fourth episode, and so far, everything is doing fine. To my students who just finished their midterm examinations, great job. You are all doing excellently every single day. Today, we shall be moving forward with our next lessons and discuss more about how philosophy evolved during the medieval times. Speaking of medieval times, this period began after the fall of Rome, towards the end of the 15th century. Medieval period, in its simplest terms, is also known as the Middle Ages, between Roman and Renaissance periods. During this era, Christian philosophy flourished and found its way across the globe through European navigators. Among the many, few people stood out in the quest to clarify divisive doctrinal issues, which has become the foundations of Christian theology. One of the most important early figures in the development of Western Christianity is Augustine, who brought dominance in the previously pagan Roman Empire. He was considered as father of Orthodox theology and the greatest father of the Latin Church. His account of his early life could be found in his work Confessions, which is widely regarded as the classic biography of conversion experience. Kindly note that Augustine was a pagan. A pagan is someone who worships several gods at once, or they have no interest in a god at all. It must be fine to note that Augustine was a womanizer who fathered a son from a mistress before the age of 20 and lived with that mistress for 10 years, only to dump a woman just to be with a socialite. He was a gambler and a critic of virtues. So just imagine how Augustine's conversion has affected his perspectives in life. With the influence of Milan's famous Bishop Ambrose and his mother Monica, he became more interested in Christianity. Through this voluntary conversion, he was able to think in depth about how life must be lived. He emphasized that free will in choosing one's belief is good, provided that one should look after himself through the power of conscience. In his book, The City of God, it was noted that the fall of Rome, or the Roman Empire, resulted in the internal moral decay or the decomposition of the moral values of people within the empire. And that Augustine wants us to realize that in order for a civilization to flourish, it must have the good foundations of morality through each person's conscience. He argued that Rome was punished for the past sins, not for a new faith. His lifelong obsession with original sin was fleshed out, and his work formed the basis of the medieval mind. Mankind, according to him, is divided into two sorts, he wrote, such as live according to man and such as live according to God. These we call the two cities. The heavenly city outshines Rome. There, instead of victory, there is truth. Furthermore, While science and faith may be sometimes irreconcilable, Augustine also introduced reason into his discussions of Christianity. And like in the previous slides, it was discussed that Augustine was a sinner and he acknowledged it. After his conversion experience, he viewed that people use their genitals or sexual organs as objects of temptation. And that he said that orgasm is the abandonment of will and control of one's sinful desires. He argues that sexual intercourse must only be done for procreation or reproduction purposes and must not be abused as a form of leisure. Augustine said that other forms aside from procreation must be strictly forbidden. Hence, celibacy, according to him, is the most blessed state. Let me end our discussion with Augustine with a famous maxim from him. He said, "Faith is to believe what you do not yet see. The reward for this faith is to see what you believe." Miraculously, his writings survived, and his theology became one of the main pillars on which the church of the next 1,000 years was built. He went on to become a powerful influence on the spirituality and theology of the Christian church. To know more about Augustine, here is a quick video.
So who was St. Augustine? St. Augustine lived over 1,600 years ago in northern Africa, modern-day Algeria to be exact. Why is he important? Well, for one, he was a theologian who strongly influenced the early Christian church. He helped establish the concept of original sin and of total dependence on the grace of Jesus Christ for salvation. His books are still considered classics to this day and can be found on the shelves of most bookstores and libraries. But things didn't start out so rosy for old Augustine. Born in 354 AD in the Roman province of Africa, Augustine knew from an early age the battle of light and darkness. His mother, Monica, was a devout Christian, but his father, Patricius, was a pagan, which is a fancy word for someone who didn't believe in God. His home life was likely a bit of a challenge. Eventually, despite the ardent wishes of his mother, he abandoned Christianity for the more open-minded paradigm of his father. Once at school, he became a Manichaean, a belief in the struggle between good and evil, but void of any higher power such as God. It wasn't long before he became rather wild, indulging in all sorts of sinful behavior. During this time, he uttered his infamous prayer, "Grant me chastity and continence, but not yet." After well over a decade of vacillating between this philosophy and that philosophy, he was finally struck with the truth. One day, out of thin air, he heard the voice of a child telling him to take up and read, which he took as a command to read the Bible. Scrambling for the nearest copy, he took the book in his hands and decided to read the first words his eyes fell upon. The passage he happened to read changed his life forever. Clothe yourself with the presence of the Lord Jesus Christ, and don't let yourself think about ways to indulge your evil desires. Augustine gave his life to Jesus on the spot, and nothing could have made his mother happier. Within 2 years, and after the death of his son, who had also given his life to Jesus, Augustine sold his inheritance and gave every last penny to the poor. His only remaining possession was the family house, which he promptly converted into a monastery. He soon became a famous preacher, most noted for combating the Manichaean religion, the very one he had followed in his youth. He was eventually ordained a priest and later made a bishop of a town called Hippo. There he worked tirelessly for the rest of his life in efforts to convince its population to believe in Jesus and live for the city of God. He died on August 28, 430 AD. He was 75 years old. To this day, St. Augustine's life and writings remain among the most influential in Christian history. His confessions expose his weakness. His letters and sermons reveal Christ's strength, and his devotion to Jesus serves as a glorious example of how to live.
The next philosopher we will talk about is Thomas Aquinas, who was considered as one of the most influential medieval thinkers of scholasticism and the father of Thomistic theology. Combining the theological principles of faith with the principles of philosophy of reason, Thomas Aquinas ranked among the most influential thinkers of medieval scholasticism. He founded Thomism as a school of thought. Shortly after his death, Thomas Aquinas' theological and philosophical writings rose to great public acclaim and reinforced a strong following among the Dominicans. Universities, seminaries, and colleges came to use Summa Theologica as the leading theology textbook. The influence that he made with his writings has been so great, in fact, that an estimated 6,000 commentaries on his work exist today. This book is considered as one of the greatest books ever written. It answers most, if not all, questions about God, humanity, and universe. Because of this book, he was declared as the doctor of the church. According to him, there are two sources of knowledge: revelation or theology, and reason or philosophy. He suggested that revelation is a divine source of knowledge that revealed truths that must be believed by men, even if they cannot be understood. This is where reason comes in, that one must extend the limits of his mind in order to explore the unexplored and answer questions which may rise from doubt. The capital sins are the source of all sins. Thomas Aquinas preferred to use the word vice instead of sin when addressing this issue. He stated, "A capital vice is that which has an exceedingly desire, so that in his desire for it, a man goes on to commission of the many sins, all of which are said to originate in that vice as their chief source." Here, Thomas Aquinas emphasized the disposition or the habit which inclines a person to sin. Therefore, the capital sins or vices are indeed capital and grave because they are the source of particular actual sins, which may be mortal or which may be venial in nature. Let's start with the first deadly vice, according to Thomas Aquinas: anger. Anger is the inordinate desire for revenge. For example, words spoken in anger, whether unkind or hurtful statements about another person, can cut the very core of that person. Second, anger sometimes offends against justice, since a person goes beyond the course to remedy issues and they just want to seek revenge. Thomas Aquinas listed 6 effects of the vice of anger: indignation, mental disturbance, noisy speech, blasphemy, abuse, and quarrels. The second one is gluttony. Gluttony is an inordinate desire for food and drink. Gluttony is injurious to one's mental and physical health, and sometimes and oftentimes masks an even deeper spiritual problem. One must practice the virtue of temperance to prevent gluttony. Also, a person should be mindful of the physical consequences of abusing eating, like the food and the drink. For instance, excessive drinking can lead to alcoholism. Finally, a person should always be mindful of those who are less fortunate and those who suffer from lack of proper drinking, water, and food. There is no good reason to waste food, especially when there are people who are also suffering from hunger. The third one is envy. Envy is sadness on account of the goods possessed by another, which are regarded as harmful to oneself, since they diminish one's own excellence. Envy breeds hatred, gossip, detraction, and resentment against another person. Not only does an envious person resent another person's goods, be they talents, looks, possessions, works, or popularity, he also takes joy in and even relishes in, the setbacks or adversity that a person faces. Envy is a vicious sin because it creeps into the best of relationships, even spouses who love each other. The fourth one is greed. To combat greed, one must be thankful in prayer each day for the many blessings enjoyed. Examine how well those blessings are used within one's means to help those less fortunate, and remember that when one dies, everything is left behind. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, when we die and face judgment, we stand before our Lord with empty hands. What is important is that time is a soul filled with love for Him and inscribed with good deeds. The fifth one is lust. Lust is the inordinate desire for sexual pleasure. Filled with lust, a person selfishly seeks to satisfy his sexual desire. He seeks personal, fleeting, or short gratification. He looks upon others not as persons, but as mere bodies or sexual objects. Sins stemming from lust include dwelling on impure thoughts, masturbation, fornication, adultery, and viewing pornography. In the end, lust leads to an idolization of sexual pleasure. Pride. Pride is a very dangerous vice. As Thomas Aquinas noted, because a person is so susceptible to it due to the woundedness of original sin, pride can easily creep into our lives, grow quickly without recognition, and take hold, infecting everything that we do. Spiritual remedies for pride, according to Aquinas, include regular and thorough self-examination, practice of humility and meditation on Christ's humility and service for all. Last but not the least, sloth. Sloth is not just laziness, but especially spiritual laziness. Sins which stem from the vice of sloth include lukewarmness towards divine precepts, drifting to what is forbidden, and frequenting the occasion of sin, faint-heartedness, and despair of salvation. The remedy for sloth is remembering one's promised eternal reward as well as one's punishment for sin. I hope you understand something from our discussions today, ladies and gentlemen. That's all for now. Until next time, it's me, Sir JP, bidding you goodbye. Thank you for joining us.